Everyone moved through the marble halls in silence, their footsteps echoing off the high, white walls. Torchlight danced over carved pillars, but on this night nothing felt warm. In the grand throne room, tall glass windows showed a dark sky and distant stars. The air smelled faintly of old incense and damp stone. At the far end, the alien princess lay on a low bed of carved bone and velvet. Her body was still, her breathing shallow. No sound came from her lips. Only the hush of. The palace spoke of her fate. She had lain like this since the night of the raid. 2 suns back, a band of raiders had struck without warning. Candles had shattered, guards had fallen. In the chaos, she felt a sharp pain in her spine, then darkness. When she awoke, she could not move her arms or legs. Her own voice felt distant, as if it belonged to someone else. She tried again to call for help, but only a soft sigh escaped her throat. In brighter days the princess had known the glow of friendly faces. She remembered the warmth of her nurse's touch and the soft hum of healing lights. She recalled music drifting through the halls, notes that lifted her heart. She thought of her parents, standing proud at her naming ceremony, their eyes full of hope. She thought of the people who once cheered her name in the streets. Those memories faded now like pictures torn from a book. All that remained was the silent chamber and her own breath. Outside her door, torches flickered, but no one dared to enter. Rumors flew that her paralysis was a sign of dark magic or a hidden poison. Wise men whispered that any who offered aid might share her doom. The court physician had studied her charts, then shaken his head and left without a word. Other healers refused to even look at her, fearing a curse beyond their skill. The grand hall, once filled with gentle hope, stood cold and empty. Within the royal circle, fear took root. Ministers spoke in low voices behind closed doors. Some argued that saving her would cost too much. Others claimed it was safer to leave her and protect the throne. Their faces were grave and hard. Pride and caution shut their hearts, so that mercy found no place. They sent word that no healer should approach the princess's chamber under penalty of exile or worse. In that moment, the princess felt the weight of her world collapsing. She lay in darkness, her mind racing against the pain. Tears gathered in her eyes, but she could not brush them away. She longed for a single hand to rest on her arm, for a kind word to break the silence. Each breath felt heavier than the last, and hope slipped like sand through her fingers. The walls around her seemed to grow taller, pressing her small form into the cold stone floor. Beyond the palace gates, the city slept uneasily under twin moons. Guards walked empty streets, aware of the strange hush in the air. Traders and farmers spoke in hushed tones of the fallen princess and of a kingdom that had turned its back on its own heir. The news spread like wildfire, carried on wind and wings of ravens. Yet still no stranger came to heal, to comfort, or to stand by her side. In the silent palace, the princess waited, her heart heavy with longing and a flicker of fear for what might come next. Everyone woke to a pale dawn, light filtering through the high windows of the silent palace. Torch holders stood empty along the corridor, their flames long since guttered out. Servants moved in hushed steps past the princess's chamber, their eyes fixed on the ground. No one stopped to offer water or food. No one paused to ask if she needed help. The walls of the corridor seemed to lean inward, pressing closer with each passing footstep. Inside her chamber, the princess lay still, her eyes wide in quiet fear. She listened to the soft scrape of feet on stone and felt her hope shrink further. Into the shadows. Memory drifted through her mind like a fading song. She remembered a time when laughter had filled these halls, when music had drifted from a distant balcony to soothe her restless nights. She pictured her nurse bending to tie her shawl, humming a gentle tune as she worked. She saw her parents pale with pride as they watched her first steps, their hands trembling with joy. Those moments felt as distant now as a star in the morning sky. Each recollection glowed and then dimmed, leaving behind only emptiness and the sharp ache of loneliness. Outside her door, rumors spread like wildfire among palace staff. Some whispered that her paralysis was the work of a dark curse. Others spoke in fearful tones of a poison that could spread through the air. One veteran guard swore he had heard the soft hiss of magic around her bed at night. The court physician refused to enter, claiming he could not risk his own life. Healers shook their heads and crossed themselves before turning away. Those who once vied for a glimpse of the princess now fled her presence, convinced that anyone who dared care for her would share her fate. The princess felt each day stretch into a long, silent trial. She tried to move her fingers, but only felt numbness. She tried to whisper for help, but only a faint sigh escaped her lips. She longed to reach out, to feel the warmth of a hand on her own, but her body refused her. Hours passed in a blur of aching limbs and pounding thoughts. She counted the shadows that moved across the floor as the sun climbed and fell. Each shift of light marked another moment that passed without solace, and with every passing moment her spirit weary. Beyond the palace walls, the city began its daily stir. Street vendors prepared their stalls, and children chased stray cats through dusty lanes. Yet the news of the paralyzed princess cast a pall over the waking world. Some citizens shook their heads in sorrow as they passed the palace gates. A few brave souls left flowers at the guardhouse, hoping their small tribute might reach her. But the guards collected the blossoms and tossed them aside, wary of any item that touched her chamber. Acts of kindness wilted before they could bloom. In the council chamber, ministers sat around a long table carved from ebony wood. Their faces were solemn, their voices low and measured. One spoke of the cost of caring for the princess, of the resources required to keep her alive. Another warned that drawing attention to her might invite new threats. A third argued that a kingdom must protect its rule before it can protect a single life. Their words were calm but cold, intent on preserving power over mercy. When the debate ended, they sent orders that no one was to enter the princess's room without express permission, and no permission would be given. As twilight fell, the princess felt the weight of her world grow heavier. The last of the daylight faded, and the torches remained unlit. Darkness pooled around her bed as she closed her eyes against the cold. She thought of the city sleeping under twin moons, of laughter she might never hear again. A single tear slipped down her cheek, pooling on the velvet cushion. She prayed for a miracle, for anyone to defy the fear and cross the threshold into her silent chamber. But as the night deepened, the palace stood empty, and hope seemed as distant as the stars above. Ryan arrived at the edge of the city just as the morning mist lifted from the fields. He wore simple clothes and carried a small pack of supplies. He had heard whispers in distant ports of a paralyzed alien princess who lay abandoned in the palace. Curiosity and compassion drove him forward. He wanted to see if he could help her. He passed under the great stone archway and found himself in a quiet street. Few people moved about. Most shutters were closed. The air felt heavy, as if the city held its breath. At the guard post, Ryan paused. Two soldiers in polished armor sat on stools, staring down at cracked paving stones. One looked up when Ryan approached. "What brings you here, stranger?" the guard asked, voice low. "I seek the princess," Ryan said. "I am a healer." "I wish to offer help." The guard's eyes narrowed. He pointed at the huge palace gates just ahead. "No one may enter the princess's wing. Orders from the council. She is cursed, they say." Ryan nodded, though the word curse felt strange on his tongue. He reached into his pack and pulled out a worn notebook. "I have studied many cures for strange ailments. May I speak to a master?" "Physician?" The guard stood and blocked the path. "The physicians have all refused. You will be turned away." Ryan did not argue. Instead, he walked onto the palace gate and waited. Pale sunlight glinted on metal doors carved with ancient scenes. He studied every detail, searching for a clue to his best approach. After a long silence, one guard left and another took his place. Ryan gave the new guard a respectful nod. Over the next hour, Ryan watched servants move in and out of the gate. They carried baskets of fruit, stacks of blankets, and trays of medicated oils, but none went to the princess's wing. Fear had shut every hand against her. Ryan's heart ached at the sight. Determined, He followed one servant as she hurried toward the east wing. He kept a few steps behind, careful to be unseen. At a shaded corner, he slipped through an open door into a narrow hallway. Dim light filtered through narrow windows high above. The walls here were lined with scroll cases and shelves of dusty volumes. This was the palace library. Ryan felt a spark of hope. He moved quietly, brushing his fingers along the spines of old tomes. He whispered to himself, naming each in his notebook: herbal remedies of Arkan Freehold, rituals of the star priests, treatises on neuro-restoration. As he searched, he thought of the princess, lying alone in her room. He imagined the fear in her eyes and the ache in her limbs. He would not give up. In the deepest corner of the library, he found a tall shelf marked with a silver glypha symbol he recognized from legends of ancient healing devices. He pulled down a heavy scroll tied with a faded ribbon. Unrolling it on a nearby table, he read lines of alien script and saw diagrams of a small crystalline instrument called the Life Spark. The text described how the device could send pulses of energy along damaged nerve pathways. It needed a precise ritual and a clear mind. Ryan's pulse quickened. He studied the diagrams and jotted notes in his own hand. Suddenly he heard a soft footstep behind him. He turned and saw a young librarian peering at him. Her eyes were wide with surprise. "You should not be here," she whispered. Ryan lowered the scroll gently. "I seek a way to heal the princess," he said. "I believe this device could help her." The librarian hesitated, then nodded. "The device lies in a hidden chamber beneath the western wing," she said. "Many have forgotten its location. I can show you a map, but you must promise not to damage anything." Ryan offered a grateful smile. He stood and gathered his notes. Beyond the library walls, he could almost feel the princess's hope flicker again, with the librarian at his side. Ryan followed a winding corridor that led down steep stone steps into darkness. Torches burned low, casting shifting shadows on ancient carvings. The air smelled cool and damp. Somewhere, water dripped steadily into a shallow pool. He paused at a heavy door covered in strange runes. The librarian placed her palm on a carved knot, and the door swung open with a low groan. Inside, the chamber was small but neat. At its center sat a crystalline device shaped like a flower bud. Resting on a bronze pedestal, Ryan approached it slowly, reverence in his steps. He traced the delicate petals with his fingertip. He checked his notes and studied the glyphs etched into the pedestal. His heart thumped with a mix of awe and fear. This device could save the princess. But first, he would need to bring it to her chamber, set up the ritual, and hope the council's guards did not discover him. He turned to the librarian. "Thank you," he said softly. "Tonight, I will do everything I can to bring hope back to that silent room." She nodded and slipped away into the shadows. Ryan took a deep breath, lifted the device, and began the long climb back toward the princess's wing, each step echoing in the dark as his resolve burned bright. Night deepened over the silent palace. As Ryan crept along the empty corridors, he wore a dark cloak to blend into the shadows. His heart pounded with each careful step. In his arms he held the crystalline device wrapped in soft cloth. He paused at a corner where 2 guards had once stood, but now only empty stone remained. He took a steady breath, recalling the librarian's map and her quiet promise to guide him. He was determined to bring hope back to the princess's chamber. The hallway to the princess's wing felt endless. Narrow torches burned low, sending wavering light across carved pillars. Ryan moved quietly, placing one foot before the other. He thought of the princess lying alone, of her shallow breathing and her distant eyes. He knew she needed him, but one wrong step could send the guards running. Memories of the raid that injured her flickered in his mind, shattered candles. Falling guards, her scream muffled by darkness. He pushed the memory away and focused on the task ahead. At last he reached the heavy wooden door marked with a silver crest. This was the entrance to her chamber. He knelt and pressed his ear against the wood. Inside he heard only the soft hum of silence, no footfalls, no voices. He gently pushed the door open and slipped inside. The room was dim, lit by pale moonlight streaming through tall windows. The princess lay on her bed, her pale skin almost glowing in the gloom. Beside her, empty jars of water and wilted flowers testified to the neglect she endured. Ryan moved to the small table he had prepared earlier. He set down the device and unwrapped it carefully. The crystal petals shimmered faintly under his touch. He opened his pack and withdrew the ritual cloth and a small vial of clear liquid. He laid them out in a neat circle on the floor before the bed. Each item had its place, drawn from the scroll he studied in the library. His fingers trembled slightly. As he arranged the elements, he whispered each step to himself, making sure not to miss a word. The princess watched him in silence. Her eyes fluttered as if she sensed something new. Ryan knelt beside her bed. He spoke softly, his voice a gentle breeze in the still air. "I am here to help you," he said. "I have brought the life spark device. It can send pulses of energy through your nerves." He placed a hand over her wrist to check her pulse. It was weak but steady. His own pulse raced in response. He began the ritual by reciting the words he had translated from the ancient scroll. He spoke slowly and clearly, "By the spark of life and the strength of hope, may these pulses heal what darkness stole." Each phrase felt strange on his tongue, but he believed in its power. He dipped his finger in the vial and traced a symbol on the device's bronze pedestal. The crystal petals opened slightly, as if breathing. Suddenly, a soft hum filled the chamber. The device emitted a gentle glow, like starlight captured in glass. Ryan placed his hands on either side of the crystal and closed his eyes, focusing on the princess's energy. He felt a warmth spread through his palms, moving up his arms. It flowed into the device and then into the air around them. The hum grew louder, filling his ears, until it felt like a chorus of tiny bells ringing in time with his heartbeat. Inside her body, the princess felt a tingle at the base of her spine. It was like the first beat of a distant drum. She tried to breathe more deeply, and her chest rose with a new strength. An electric warmth crept through her limbs. She dared to imagine movement. A faint spark of hope lit her mind, banishing some of the shadow that had settled there. Ryan kept his hands steady. Sweat gathered at his brow as he monitored the glow. He whispered encouragement to the device as if it were a creature in need of coaxing. "It's working," he said softly. "Just a little more." He felt a surge of relief when the glow brightened and then steadied, as though the device had found its rhythm. After what felt like an eternity, the hum began to fade. The glow dimmed to a soft pulse, then winked out entirely. Ryan opened his eyes and looked at the princess. Her fingers twitched, lifting slightly from the bed. Her lips parted, and a single tear rolled down her cheek. He reached out and brushed it away with his fingertip. In that moment, the palace walls felt less cold. The silence became a promise instead of a prison. Ryan offered the princess a gentle smile. For the first time since the raid, her eyes shone with gratitude. He knew the journey was not over. She still needed full healing and the council's trust, but he had rekindled her spirit. He gathered the device and ritual cloth, preparing to leave before the guards discovered him. As he slipped from the chamber, he glanced back at the princess rising on one elbow, hope quivering in her gaze. The night held its breath, and the future began to stir. Ryan returned before dawn, slipping once more into the quiet palace halls. The torches were still unlit, and the air felt cool on his skin. He carried the life spark device carefully, wrapped in the same soft cloth as before. His heart beat with hope and fear. As he neared the princess's chamber, he paused and listened. From inside came a soft sound, almost like a sigh of relief. He pressed his hand to the door, then gently pushed it open. The princess lay on her bed, but she was no longer still. She sat up slowly, propping herself on trembling arms. Her face lit in the pale moonlight as she saw Ryan enter. With effort, she swung her legs over the side of the bed and let her feet touch the velvet rug. For the first time since the raid, she felt strength in her limbs. Her fingers curled around the edge of the bed as she rose to stand, leaning on the mattress for support. She gave a small, amazed smile and looked at Ryan with gratitude shining in her eyes. Ryan set the device on the table and knelt beside her. He checked her pulse at her wrist, noting each steady beat. You are stronger than last night, he said softly. Your nerves are waking. Soon you will walk again. The princess nodded, her eyes bright. She tried a small step toward him, her ankle wobbling but holding. Ryan steadied her with a gentle hand at her elbow. Good, he encouraged. One step at a time. They knew the council would never accept magic or human devices without proof. They needed a healer who could speak for them. Ryan explained that an old healer named Mara lived in a hidden clinic beyond the palace walls. She was known for studying ancient lore. They agreed to seek her help at first light. The princess gathered her courage and dressed in a simple gown. Ryan packed the device and a few supplies, and together they slipped out through a side door. The city beyond the gates lay quiet under a pale sky. Ryan supported the princes as they hurried down narrow lanes. Shadows danced on stone walls as shop doors remained closed. At the edge of town they found a low building marked with a silver lantern crest. Inside, the air smelled of herbs and oils. An elderly woman bent over a table, mixing powders in a brass bowl. She looked up with sharp, clear eyes. Who comes at dawn? She asked. The princess stepped forward, her hand brushing Ryan's for strength. I am the princess, she said, voice soft but firm. I have been healed by this human's device. I seek your help to restore me fully. The healer's gaze shifted to Ryan, then back to the princess. She studied the device wrapped in cloth. Such power is rare, she murmured, and human craft rarer still. She hesitated, unsure if she dared help. To prove the truth, the princess let go of Ryan's arm and took a step forward on her own. Then another. Her gown rustled as she moved. The healer gasped and dropped her bowl. By the old gods, she whispered. She hurried to help the princess to a stool and examined her carefully. I will lend my skill, but the council must see this truth. The princess nodded, relief and hope lighting her face. Later that morning, word spread through the palace that the princess would stand. Servants peered from doorways as she walked in the courtyard, each step sure and brave. Ryan carried the device behind her, and healer Mara walked at her side. They entered the echoing hall where the council gathered around a long table. The ministers stared in shock as the princess approached on steady feet. She spoke before any could move. Honored council, her voice rang clear. I stand before you healed by a human's gift and an alien healer's skill. I ask not for praise, but for mercy and unity. Let our world learn from hope, not fear. She gestured to Ryan and Mara. Ryan placed the device on the table and described its power. To prove it, he healed a guard's injured wrist with a gentle pulse. The council murmured in awe. The lead minister rose and spoke slowly. We have seen our airwalk again. We have heard her plea. Let our healers learn this art. Let peace guide our choices. Other ministers nodded, some with tears. The princess bowed her head and turned to Ryan. He smiled and offered his hand. She took it, strengthened their grasp. Outside the hall, sunlight broke through clouded skies. The palace walls no longer felt cold. Hope had returned, carried on human kindness. An alien grace. The day after the council meeting dawned with a soft light across the palace. The princess stood on a balcony and watched the courtyard below. Her gown brushed the marble floor as she stepped forward. Behind her, healer Mara and Ryan watched with quiet pride. The court gathered in the yard, curious and hopeful. Birds sang in the trees as the princess raised her voice. Today we begin a new chapter, she said, her tone both gentle and firm. The crowd fell silent, hanging on every word. Hope stirred in every heart as she spoke of healing and unity. In the days that followed, Ryan worked with the palace healers to share the life spark ritual. Each morning he taught a small group in a bright chamber off the throne room. The healers watched closely as he demonstrated the device's care and the words of the ritual. They practiced on small wounds and pulled splinters from wood. Slowly, they gained skill and confidence. The princess visited often to thank them and encourage success. Under her gentle guidance, fear gave way to excitement. One afternoon, a messenger arrived from a border outpost. Raiders who had attacked the princess's village now threatened a neighboring town. The princes and Ryan conferred in a quiet study. She traced routes on a worn map while he packed the device in its soft cloth. They agreed to travel at dawn to speak with the raider leader. They hoped a show of peace might prevent further bloodshed. The king's guards rode with them, wary but curious at their peaceful mission. At sunrise they reached the outpost, a rough camp of tents and low walls. A tall raider chief emerged to meet them, flanked by armed warriors. His eyes were sharp, with suspicion. The princess stepped forward, her posture calm. "We come in peace," she said. "We wish to end the fear between our peoples." Ryan stood beside her, holding the device openly. He showed how it could heal wounds, not harm. The chief frowned, but invited them to speak. Inside the chief's tent, they laid out simple gifts, fresh fruit and fine cloth from the palace stores. Ryan demonstrated on a wounded soldier, sending a small pulse through the device. The man's pain eased, and he smiled with relief. The chief watched quietly as the princess spoke of shared future and safe trade. She spoke of children learning together and healers helping all. When she finished, a hush fell. The chief slowly nodded, then offered his hand. Agreement was made in that moment. The return to the palace felt like celebration. Flags flew along the walls, and citizens lined the streets. Children waved branches of olive and jasmine as the princes and Ryan passed. Traders shouted greetings and offered small cups of sweet tea. At the gates, Healer Mara raised a cheer, and the palace band played a hopeful tune. The princess smiled at every face, her heart light. She knew the journey ahead held more challenges, but she felt stronger than ever. In the palace library, Ryan and Mara studied other ancient texts. They found notes of similar devices and rituals, each more elaborate than the last. Scribes copied diagrams as Ryan explained the science behind the pulses. Healer Mara wrote the alien script into the palace's new healing manual. Soon the manual would guide all healers in the kingdom. Ryan watched the pages fill with words and symbols, a testament to what could be achieved when different worlds came together. One evening the princes and Ryan walked through the palace guard. Lanterns hung like quiet stars among the flowering vines. She reached out to touch a blossom, its petals soft as silk. "I never thought I would dance here again," she said softly. Ryan offered his arm, and she linked her hand with his. They walked in silence, listening to crickets and the distant murmur of water in the fountain. In that moment their worries felt distant and joy felt close, but far on the horizon, dark shapes gathered. Raider ships loitered off the coast, their sails like storm clouds. Scouts reported they came to test the princess's promise of peace. The palace bells rang, warning of ships on the sea. The princess stood at the shore's edge, wind blowing her hair. She felt no fear, now only resolve. Beside her, Ryan held the life spark device, ready to heal or defend as needed. As the raider ships drew near, the princess raised her voice across the waves. "I ask for a chance," she called. "Let us prove that hope is stronger than fear." The ship slowed, and a small boat pushed through the surf. The chief they had met before stood at its bow, his face unreadable. He raised a hand in greeting. Behind him, his warriors lowered their weapons. In that moment, the world held its breath, and the promise of peace stood ready to guide the next chapter. The morning light glowed softly across the palace courtyard as the raider ships lay anchored beyond the harbor. The princess stood on a raised platform beside Ryan and Healer Mara. Around them gathered citizens, soldiers, and foreign delegates drawn by the promise of peace. The air felt electric with possibility. For the first time, the kingdom faced a test not of war, but of trust. The raider chief stepped forward on the sandy beach, his robes fluttering in the sea breeze. He raised a hand to the princess and spoke through a translator. "We have watched your courage," he said. "We have seen you choose mercy over fear. Now we seek to join in this new bond." His warriors lowered their spears and set them in the sand. A hush fell over all who stood nearby. The princess felt her heart soar. She had long feared this moment, unsure if her words could heal old wounds. Yet here, before her people and hers, the raiders accepted her hand. She offered her palm, and the chief pressed his fingertips against hers. Ryan and Mara stood ready with the life spark device, but it remained unused. This moment belonged to words and will, not magic. Beneath the platform, children from both worlds gathered to collect small flags of both realms. They wove them together, creating banners of mixed colors that fluttered on tall poles. Their laughter rose like birdsong, ringing out across the marble steps. The princess knelt to whisper encouragement and joy, her gown rustling softly on the stone. In her eyes she carried all the hope that had once been locked away. After the ceremony, delegates from the Raider world and the princess's council walked together through the palace gardens. They discussed trade routes, shared water supplies, and plans for joint festivals. Healer Mara guided them to a grove of healing herbs, where she taught Raider medics how to use aloe bloom and silver leaf. Ryan demonstrated how the life spark device complemented their medicines, but he emphasized it as a tool of last resort. As the sun climbed, a feast was prepared in the great hall. Long tables were draped in fine cloth and piled with fruits, breads, and spice stews. Servants offered cups of honeyed tea and roasted nuts on small trays. The raiders tasted the palace cuisine with curious smiles, while palace guards sampled Raider dried meats and sweet squash. They raised cups in a toast led by the princes and the chief. Throughout the meal, the princess moved among the guests, greeting each face with a nod or soft word. She listened to stories of Raider life, harsh deserts, deep canyons, and the bonds of tribe. The chief listened in return as palace merchants described floating gardens, crystal spires, and libraries filled with star maps. Laughter and gentle questions filled the hall. Walls that once held fear now echoed with friendship. In the late afternoon, a small crisis arose when a young apprentice healer fainted in the heat. Panic fluttered for a moment, but Healer Mara stepped forward calmly. She placed the apprentice in shade and applied cool claws. Ryan pressed the life spark device gently to the apprentice's brow, sending a soft pulse. Color returned to the healer's cheeks within seconds. The crowd watched in awe, then cheered when the apprentice opened. Her eyes. The princess rose and spoke to the assembled guests. "Today we prove that healing comes from courage, not from who we are," she said. "We are stronger when we stand together." She gestured to the Raider chief and Ryan. "Together we will build a future of shared knowledge, shared strength, and shared hope." Applause rolled through the hall like distant thunder. Many wiped tears from their eyes. As dusk painted the sky in soft pinks, Raider ships took on new colors. Painters boarded each vessel to decorate the sails with symbols of unity, interlaced vines, rising suns, and twin moons. Palace artisans carved wooden reliefs to hang on the masts. Children clapped and cheered as the ships glowed under torchlight. The harbor no longer felt like a border but a meeting place. That night, under a sky of bright stars, the princes and Ryan walked along the shoreline. The gentle waves lapped at their feet. She leaned against him, her voice a soft murmur. "I could never have done this alone," she said. He smiled and took her hand. "You led the way," he replied. "I only followed your light." In the distance, the Raider ships rocked peacefully, and the world felt wider than ever before. Back in her chamber, the princess rested on her bed but did not feel the cold emptiness that had haunted her before. Outside her window, the courtyard lanterns burned with steady light. The walls no longer felt like cages. She closed her eyes and remembered the faces of her people, the Raiders and the healers. She thought of the device that had brought her hope and the words that had brought her peace. As she slept, the palace stood alive with new energy. Guards patrolled with relaxed steps, and servants hummed gentle tunes. Ryan and Healer Mara prepared for tomorrow's lessons in the healing halls. The council rewrote its decrees to include all peoples. And in the quiet night air, the promise of unity shone brighter than any star, guiding the kingdom into a future its princes had dared to dream.